Much indeed. Right, we have a pretty extensive list of questions from the press, and the first up is Ben Wright from the BBC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farage. Your plans could mean sending thousands of asylum seekers back to countries where they might face imprisonment, torture, even death. Does that bother you at all? And what happens if countries refuse to take people back?
Does it bother me? Of course it bothers me, but what really bothers me is what is happening on the streets of our country. What really bothers me is what is happening to British citizens. What really bothers me is, and you've seen this from the Bell Hotel onwards, the growing concern with justifiable evidence that women and girls are far less safe on the streets than they were before this began. So it's all about whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the British people or international treaties? Now, where countries, and I think Zia laid that out, that it's going to be a carrot and stick approach to it, but if we can't get deals with certain countries, then we think this country has considerably more muscle, diplomatic muscle, than perhaps those in Westminster currently recognise, then we will have to find other locations. And, you know, we're going to be talking to Albania, we'll talk to Rwanda, we will find solutions. Catherine Foster from GB News.
Thank you, Catherine Foster, GB News. Nigel Farage, last September you told GB News that it was a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people and that you simply couldn't do it. What has changed your mind that you now believe that you can?
The political impossibility was deporting millions and millions of people, and that's where the argument had gone. We had a situation, a political difficulty within Reform UK. This does happen to parties. They do have difficulties and problems. We had a problem that one of our MPs, who's no longer an MP, was talking about deporting entire communities, including people who've been born here. And frankly, we found that unacceptable. And so I just did not want, I think you can quote me for another interview, to get dragged down the route of mass deportations at that stage. We have sorted out that political internal difficulty that we had, and since that time, the work has been done on a credible plan so that we can deport hundreds of thousands of people over the 5 years of a Reform government. Thank you. Harry Horton, ITV.
Thank you very much. Harry Horton, ITV News. Nigel Farage, you've said that you can't be held responsible for everything that happens in the world. But if someone says that if you deport me, I'll be tortured, I'll face abuse, surely there is some responsibility on you to stop that from happening. And secondly, if I may, how far back does this go? Where do you draw the line? You say you're going to deport everyone who's arrived here illegally. What are the parameters for that? Yeah,
I mean, look, you know, how far back you go with this is the difficulty, and I accept that. You know, and the next question that Zia and I will get asked is, what about those that are here illegally and have got children? So, you know, I'm not standing here telling you all of this is easy, all of this is straightforward. You know, and we had, of course, with the Windrush row, we had a situation there where people who'd come 50, 60, in fact, nearly 70 years ago had faulty paperwork. So there is an exercise of common sense that has to come in here. But do we realistically think, Zia, we can deport 500,000, 600,000 people in the lifetime of the first Parliament?
Totally, yeah. I mean, so look, one of the key points to make here is if you look at the population who are illegally, and by the way, this is difficult because you're trying to count the uncountable almost by definition. You're talking north of 650,000 adults without children who are in this country illegally. And by the way, those are the ones the British people are most concerned about. They're the ones who in some cases are terrorising local communities, hanging around bus shelters. Let's start with deporting them. Let's get that done promptly and efficiently.
Yeah, and of course, once we start this, people will not in future be coming to Britain illegally. The precedent for this is Australia in 2012, where within 2 weeks of Tony Abbott taking the right actions, the boats stopped coming from Indonesia. The solution to this is not difficult. It's been the lack of political will to put in measure the right places is why we're now in this position where, as I said earlier, the public are between a mixture of utter despair but increasing and growing anger. Serena Bankin-Singh from Sky.
You've said that you're going to detain anyone who arrives via small boats. Will that apply to women and girls? And what about unaccompanied children? Will they remain in Britain while their parents are turfed out? And then you said you would leave the UN Torture Convention. Australia and the US haven't done this. Are you comfortable of the risk of people being killed or tortured if they're sent back to their country of origin? And will pulling out of these international treaties lose UK credibility on the international stage?
Well, we're talking about disapplying for up to 5 years a variety of conventions that do need broader debate and certainly at a UN level need reform and change. As far as the ECHR is concerned, we're very much of the view that it's a body that they say is separate from the European Union, but you know, I could walk from my office in Strasbourg straight into the European Court of Human Rights. They're joined at the hip. I don't see any prospect, frankly, in the short term, of the ECHR being reformed. Now, you might argue that Germany, who now, of course, have a whole series of deportation flights set up, you might argue that Denmark, which now has a zero asylum policy, you might argue that, well, if those countries can do it, why can't we do it? But, of course, the problem has been our own judiciary. We have to remove the tools from our own judiciary for them to be a barrier to this process. And yes, women and children, everybody on arrival will be detained. And I've accepted already that how we deal with children is a much more complicated and difficult issue. But you know what? The people protesting outside the Bell Hotel and at 30 migrant hotels on Saturday around the country weren't doing it because of the few children coming. They were doing it because over 3/4 of those that come are young, undocumented males who come from cultures that are entirely different from ours, who are very unlikely to assimilate into our community, who pose a risk to women and girls, and some of them, I'm afraid, pose a risk to national security. So that's pretty clear, I think, what our priorities are. Paul McNamara, Channel 4.
Hi, Mr. Farage. There is a realistic possibility that if you go forward with this, there might be a case where someone arrives in the UK by a small boat, you send them back to the country from which they came, and they will be tortured or killed because of a decision that you've made. How does that sit with you?
Well, the alternative, of course, is to do nothing. I mean, that's the very clear alternative, is we just do nothing. We just allow this problem to magnify and grow. We head to a point where and I genuinely, I'm not, I don't want this to happen. I want our proposals to be accepted so that we can prevent civil disorder from happening. But that is the direction this country is headed in. And we cannot be responsible for all the sins that take place around the world. It's just literally impossible. But we can recognise that the primary duty of a British government is to protect the integrity, the safety and security of its own people. And, that's why we have to do this. I mean, Zia said in his speech that nothing short of these measures will work. And I think we all genuinely believe that. If we allow any loopholes to remain open with this, it isn't going to happen. Is this a perfect world? Are these things all that we want to do? Well, we shouldn't have been put in this position. Well, we've been put in this position by Conservative and Labour governments. We have to do something tough. We have to do something radical. And this is a plan that will work. Andy Bell, Channel 5 News.
Thank you, Andy Bell, 5 News. So if you're able to implement your policy, do you accept that that means border force agents going into towns, looking for people who are here illegally, maybe who already have families, maybe who already have children? And you mentioned Windrush earlier and say, well, this is slightly complicated. There are going to be any number of people who are